Andrea from Chasing Whimsy. I'm going to show you just really quickly how I turned this image into a snowy scene because I had a few people ask, how did you do that? I'm actually working on a real winter set for winter snow fairies. This was just shot in my regular fairy set and I just wanted to try playing with some wintry things to get an idea how I'm going to work on the editing for these. So this was just kind of an experiment and it was kind of fun. But I just want to show you how to do it because some people asked. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to go into any details of how I did it. I'm just going to walk through my file and turn on the layers and tell you what I did with each one. And if there's any further explanation that you would like, a lot of this is taught in my series that are available for sale or will be in the future. So this is the image basically out of camera. I do shoot in RAW, so I took this in and did a little bit of lighting adjustment, a little bit of sharpening in Photoshop, and so this is basically where I'm starting with. The first thing I need to do, as you can see, my littlest fairy is just leaning on a stool with a pillow, so I need to give her something far more whimsical to lean on. Every time I shoot a client, I always take a picture of the scene empty, the set empty, from a couple different angles so that I have things that I can brush in over top if I need to remove things. It's right there, makes it really easy. And so I had a shot of just the mushroom, which I then cut out, and if you watch on her, I just stuck in a miniature version of that, masked it around her arms, etc. You can see that sort of floating here. We need to add some shadow. So just on a separate layer, I've added in some shadow beneath that. It's not perfect, but again, I was just doing this really quickly. You can kind of gauge by up here where the shadow would need to be. It's darker, obviously closer to them, and then it spreads out. This could be spread a little more, whatever, you get the idea. Then I needed to basically turn the whole thing into a more wintry look because it's all green and foresty. My real set won't have forest stuff like this. Plants, green plants. So I did a hue saturation adjustment level or layer, and I basically I changed the color into the blues and took the saturation down to get this kind of a frosty start to everything. I did it over the mushrooms, all the background, over their dresses and wings, just nothing on them, but all of the background. So that was the start of that. So there's the before and the after, and starting to desaturate that. Then I actually have a winter backdrop that I'm going to be using for the snow fairies, which is this backdrop, which I just brushed in over top. Really roughly, I mean, I went better around their wings and stuff, but this does not have to be perfect because I'm going for a lot of texture in these, and it's not even at full opacity. You can see little bits of my set showing through there, but it totally doesn't matter for what I'm doing with this. And then I added another hue saturation adjustment layer to just that background to add some blue in there. So, whoops, I turned that off. So that's where it was. That's the natural color, and then I added some blues in there with that. The flowers on the girls, I didn't want the pink. I want to change them into a blue, so I started with a selective color, where I was taking down the yellow. Also, my yellow stool down here is still showing, so I've brushed this, which has removed a lot of the yellowy and started turning them kind of purple. Then their skin was a little bit too bright, so again, the hue saturation to cool down the skin to start it looking more frosty as well. The flowers, if you watch the flowers again, another hue saturation level will really start bringing in the blues that I'm looking for. That again was just saturation and hue, just sliding those around. And I had a little bit of red adjustment skin things to do in there. So this was the base layer of what I did for the initial sort of colorization of what I wanted to do with this. Whenever I work on Photoshop files on an image, I usually have more than one Photoshop file. I don't like to have like 3,000 layers in one file. It gets really big and hard to work with, especially because I'm working in 16-bit. It takes forever. So I'll take each photo to a certain point and then I will actually duplicate it and start a new flattened file with that duplicated one. So I'm going to pull up the next one. All right, so I've now got a new Photoshop file and I've flattened it to start with this next phase. This is where I would start actually working on my subjects, where I do all of the retouching and the dodge and burn. Again, I'm not going to go into that in this video. I'm just going to show you the finished product. You can learn all about that in my dodge and burn painting series, which is available for sale at catchthewhimsy.com. So the first thing was all of my retouching, which doesn't look like a whole lot. This is the skin softening. I go in and do eyelashes and all that sort of stuff, which I teach in that course. Then I do all my dodge and burn over top of all of them. So this is what really starts to give that painted look and give them dimension. Looks a bit funny right now because everything's not blended, but that's where I always start my images. I've added a little bit of blush on their cheeks, little rosy cheeks. From there, what have I done next here? I started working on the hair. I'm just going to zoom in a bit so you can see the hair. Again, this is taught in my series, but so I do all of the dodge and burn on their hair. I've done that and actually added in some strands, etc. This girl actually had blue hair on the bottom, which was kind of fun. So here I've done all of my dodge and burn on the hair. You can see where I've brought in all of those highlights and the shadows and the flowers as well. There's the off and the on. And then I actually run it through Topaz Adjust and add some fine detail refinement after I've done the dodge and burn. Again, all taught in the course, which brings that out. And then I will duplicate. I'm just going to zoom in again so you can really see this. Then I will do a stamped layer, which is Control-Alt-Shift-E. And from there, I will take a smudge brush, watch the hair, and actually drag the smudge brush over to get this painted look on the hair. And I did a little bit up in the flowers as well. Then the hair needed a little bit more highlighting, so I've just added more highlight, just again, curves adjustment, bring it up, and a little bit more again on just some of the tips because the light's coming from this way. And again, that's how you really start getting that nice, pretty painted look. So there's where the fairies are done. So that is pretty much the subjects finished. I've also gone into the dresses, done the dodge and burn in there a little bit. Didn't do a whole lot on this because they're white and I just want them kind of obscure and big, massive, frothy fluff. So then I started going into the background and what to do, the snowy overlays. I've just done some texture overlays. This first one, I'm just going to turn off the mask and show you what it actually looks like. This is one that I just made myself. Let's go up here to normal so you can see it. So it's basically, as you can see, just a bunch of sort of colors. I think I just kind of did it with dots. It might have actually even been a picture of flowers that I blurred and then I added some scratchy texture and stuff over top of it. And then for this, and then I masked it just around the corners and I turned it to overlay because I wanted to bring, let's turn it off here. So there's where it was, and see it's sort of flat around the edges, but when you add this on overlay, it starts to bring in some lightness and contrast adjustments in there. Then I duplicated that same one, but left it on its normal, so you actually can see that texture as it is. And again, just made sure it was off of my subjects for the most part around there. Then I did another kind of a cloudy blue texture over top. This is one that I purchased that's not available anymore, but you could probably get the same idea from doing a cloud rendering and just tinting it blue. It basically is adding some whites and lights in white and blue dots. You could do the same thing with white and blue dots and make them on soft light or something like that. I like having my textures on soft light. You can dot in these shadows to bring that out. Then I did an overall curves adjustment, which was just a very slight lightening of everything. So I barely moved this up to the left just to give a lightening over the whole thing. Then I did, this I believe was a sharpening in Topaz again. You'll see this in my course. Once again, after I've done all my work, I will go into Topaz and use the details to try. If you watch on her face, on her nose, when I turn it on, you can just see a little bit of sharpening there, and same with on the hair. So I've just basically touched those areas with that little sharpening. You could do that with just a unsharp mask or something as well, would work, just regular Photoshop. And then if you watch on the background, I did a soft focus, just blurred the edges to, let me just turn that off so you can see it's quite obvious here, and then I turn on the blur just around the edges to add that softness. I didn't put any on them, but it's just around the edges. And then I ran a filter from the Gatsby, Greater Than Gatsby Innocence collection called Nuffle Bunny, which, as you will see, it's just like a brightening and a blue, kind of an icy tone over top of the whole thing. Again, you could do that with a colored overlay, just a solid color overlay. Some contrast and fiddling adjustments like that, and just try different blend modes to get that kind of a look. So that was phase 2 of this. From here, I duplicated to a third one to do all the finishing touches. All right, and now for the finishing touches, which is kind of fun. This is good as it is, but I always like to do a little bit extra. So it looks a little bit dull to me, and one of my favorite, at this point I would start playing with contrast and things like that. You can just, a contrast adjustment would probably do it just fine. But I have something in Greater Than Gatsby. They have some color bases, different color bases that you can run, which I'll sometimes run at the beginning or in the middle or near the end like this. And one of my favorites is the emotional color base, which kind of does all that for me in one button, so I don't have to sit there fiddling with it. I always run these, open them up, and have a look through it. It does vignetting, it does some, color toning, it has all kinds of stuff that you can do by hand, but it just has it all right there for you, makes it really fast. So I'm just going to run it and show you the finish of that, so you can just see the pop and clarity that has given with that. Yeah, it's all, I always open them up and go through and turn off each layer and see what I want to do and just customize it for everything. This has got vignettes and spotlights and contrast. And the histogram fix is one of the biggest ones. That's what brought that brightening up, but that's just a levels adjustment. So you can do that totally by hand. You don't have to do that. Anyway, so there's that. From there, one of my tricks for doing a finishing sort of a haze over the whole thing is to just make a new layer, fill it with white, and turn it to soft light at a really low opacity. So here it is without it and on. So this is a white layer at soft light at 8% over the whole thing. Then I added around the edges, I used a sparkle brush from Obsidian Dawn. Here's the sparkles. So it's 3 different layers in that group, with some that are back here that are bigger and more blurred, Gaussian blurred. Then I have more clear ones and some smaller ones. So you can build a lot of depth by having some blurred in the back and then the different sizes and clarities going around. So there's sparkles without and with. Then I did, what is this? So on their skin, her face was a little bit red, so I just did a selective color adjustment to take out red in there, just adjusted the reds down where I needed it. This group is, then I just did another one of those white layers over top. This time it was at 12%, I believe. Yeah, soft light at 12%. So there it is without and with. Just another brightening haze softening again. This Moody Blue Matte is something else that I made. It's this sort of bluish layer and some curves to make it matte. And then you can play with the contrast a little bit as well. That's going to be something that will be available for sale eventually when I get some more finishing matte looks like that. So that, if I turn it on, you can see it didn't do a whole lot, but it brought some blues into the shadows and gave it a soft matte look. And then I just brought some contrast down here on the ice where it's reflecting. So that was with that. From there, I did these are like pink gradients that are in the corner. So this is the right corner down here. These are set to screen. So they're just kind of a bright haze. Then up in this upper left corner, same thing, one of those. That's a gradient. You just do a gradient adjustment layer and pick your color and move it around. It's a circle gradient. Up here, I also added some sunbeams or rays just very subtly. They're at 83% on normal. You can blur those a bit to make them less obvious, however you want. Those are also from Obsidian Dawn, I believe. If you watch on the edges here and here, some little fireflies. Those are made with lens flares. I have a video on that in these YouTubes here. You can find that, making fireflies with lens flares. And my other video about adding haze with a brush is what I did on this next layer. So new blank layer. I went to their skin color for the color, but then made it a darker brown kind of color. It's hard to tell the color on here, but it's a dark brown. And then what I do is I make my brush as big as possible. You set the mode to screen, which is going to make that dark color be lighter and glowier. So I just wanted to bring a little bit of that skin tone in. So I just basically dot it. Doesn't want to show me unless I have it on. So watch the edges. So I've just brought in those bits, and I take my brush like this big and basically dot, like put it over the picture like that, little corners of it, just touching there, wherever you want to add those little dots of light. So there's before and after of that, just to add that touch of warmth. I did an exposure correction, which was that's again a topaz adjust layer, but basically you could do that exact same. If you look at the shadows, it's deepened the shadows. You could do that exact same thing by taking a new layer, picking a blue color that's out of there, and just doing dots in a few of the shadowy areas on soft light. So a deep blue on soft light and dot it will do the exact same thing to give you that depth around where you want it. From there, I did a I think it was another blur or sharpening. No, it was a little bit of white. It was another topaz. It's called Portrait Drama or something like that. But basically, it's like adding some more curves. You could do the exact same thing in curves. And it's mostly on their faces. It's just touched up the highlights, adding a little bit more white as if I had gone over and done the dodge and burn again. So it's picking up what I've already done in there and just enhancing it a little further, which again, I talk about in the course. You can push these one button tools, but they can only grab what's there. So if you've actually done the hand painting, taken the time to do that, it has way more to grab, and then you can just add these little things and make just little subtle pops without having to do the work all over again because it's already using what you have. And then I've just thrown my logo over top. So that is the finished picture. Let me just show you before and after. So this was straight out of camera before. This is just a JPEG out of camera before I had done any raw adjustments like I showed you at the beginning. And here is the finished snowy scene. So we've transformed from this to this with the magic of Photoshop. I hope that gives you some ideas what you can do.